A to the K.
To the K.
To the K.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the A to the K Wrestling Show. Where joining us today is writer, producer, and star of the critically acclaimed movie Reversal, Jimi Petulla. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us, man. How are you?
I'm doing fine, guys. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, definitely. So I figured we started, we could, with a fairly big question. But obviously I think the best place to start really, and just to talk about obviously the film Reversal, and if we could just ask sort of how you decided you wanted to make this film.
Absolutely. Well, basically, what had happened was it's a pretty much a true story about my life. My father I was a kid, got brought up in a town called Oil City, Pennsylvania. You know how big amateur wrestling is in Pennsylvania.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And I started wrestling literally at like age 5 for the YMCA, and then of course throughout junior high and high school. And it was, when I did the film, I mean, obviously the film is set with me as a kid, 6, 7 years old. Then it flashes to me at 17, and it's really a father-son story. But I just what had happened was I was talking to some friends. I've been out in Los Angeles now for over 30 years, and I was talking to some friends about what it was like having a father who was a wrestling coach, and how I used to have to, starve myself to make weight. And they're going, "Man, that would be a cool little movie." And so I basically just started writing the script, and and I thought it would be a neat way to. I never really thought so much about the wrestling angle, but it was just the fact that me and my father and the relationship. But basically, after I wrote the script, I had a chance to meet with Alan Vint, who ultimately directed the movie. And Alan, in his own right, was a great artist. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2006, and he was a real. I mean, he did the first Al Pacino film, Panic in Needle Park, and he read my script and he said, "God, this would be a cool movie." So I said, "Well, heck, why don't we go ahead and make it?"
That's fascinating. So obviously, you said it's based on a true story. It's based on your life. Like, how much of it, of the actual things that we saw in the movie were true to your own life? And obviously, you also dedicated it to all fathers. So what was you kind of thinking behind that as well?
Well, what ended up happening, guys, believe it or not, when I originally wrote it and Alan and I decided to make it, I hadn't planned on playing the role of the father. And we had actually had some actors in place, but everybody seemed to come across the character as this, overbearing father who is just, yes, he was kind of living vicariously through me as a kid. He was a wrestler himself, and he never went to college. But I was just like, when we were reading them, I said to Alan, I go, my dad wasn't. My dad really did this out of love, but sometimes out of love, there's that blind spot. You think you're doing the right thing for your kid, and you're almost killing him. So Alan said, "Why don't you go ahead and play the role, Jimmy?" So I said, "Okay," and I did it. So I'd never acted before, and just gave it a shot.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you can never tell, to be fair, that you never acted before.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, obviously you mentioned there about the way you wanted to sort of bring the father across, and like certainly that's the first thing that hit me watching it was obviously both Carl and I are fathers. I have a son who's he's 4 years old, so I often sort of I suppose have a similar thought, and I was relating to the character so much in terms of, like, I think there's a line in there, and I am paraphrasing slightly, where you mentioned about sort of trying sort of not to make the same mistakes, and you end up making like your whole list of your own mistakes, sort of thing. And that's something that constantly runs through my mind as a father, that you're trying to do your best for them, and as you say, it's not necessarily something that goes to plan, and it's all done with the right heart. And I thought that's one thing that I thought would come through brilliantly, was that his heart was always right the way through. It was in the right place of doing the right thing by his son, which was I love the dedication to all fathers for that reason. I think it's a tale you don't see told very often, the relationship between the two.
I appreciate it. Absolutely.
So sorry, I do have a question. I just wanted to sort of mention that bit, but as I understand it, you actually decided to cast amateur wrestlers as opposed to traditional actors in the movie. So firstly, I just wanted to ask you if that was true, and sort of the importance of making that decision for you.
Absolutely. Well, basically, what happened was we first did a casting here in Los Angeles, and we put a breakdown out asking for actors who had wrestling background, and we
Mm.
actually had a kid at the time by the name of Jacob Young, and Jacob was already a series regular on The Bold and the Beautiful, one of these TV series, and he was an Oregon state champion wrestler. And we read, and he was good. And what ended up happening was we basically offered him the role, but we hadn't signed him yet. And he was, kind of hedging because he was trying to get some other movies. And of course, this is a small independent film. And then what had happened was through my wrestling contacts, we arranged to go to Pennsylvania because that's where we were going to shoot it. We shot it in Washington. I'm originally from Oil City, but that town's just kind of too small. So we found a town called Washington, PA, which is near Pittsburgh, where we could get a lot of the crew from Pittsburgh. And we had a room full of, high school wrestlers, from all around Pennsylvania. And we were auditioning really what we thought for just the smaller roles and to have some real wrestlers. And we were reading and we came upon two kids. One is Justin Spates, whose father at the time is the legendary coach for Oklahoma University, Jack Spates. He just retired a few years ago, but he was there for like 20 some years. And his son, Justin, was literally had just won the state title in Pennsylvania. And we read him, and we read another kid by the name of Danny Macedas. And Alan and I went to a restaurant after we read him, and Alan says, Jimmy, I got to tell you, Danny is what you wrote, but it's going to be risky. Keep in mind, I'm spending my own money on this film with no guarantees if anyone will see it, or no guarantees that I'll get a nickel back. And we thought, oh, it's a risk, but I thought, a wrestler has that confidence. And we read him again, and he was just something natural about him. And I thought, and so we just were like, yeah, let's just go with the real wrestlers. I said, and fortunately it worked out okay.
Yeah, definitely added some authenticity to the, especially the wrestling teams and things like that. We kind of touched on a little bit earlier, the movie does center on some pretty heavy themes, obviously, loss, redemption, and a lot around kind of just the dedication to the craft as well, and the pressure to make weight. It kind of hits you in the feels when you see, like a young Leo, or obviously based on yourself, who's like, just wants to drink a soda and has to spit it out, or on his birthday asking if he can have that piece of cake. And how important was it to you to kind of speak your truth on obviously what you had to kind of experience on the challenges of making weight and the pressure of dedication to a sport?
Right. I think it was, that was the important part. And I know, in fact, after I'd made it, they've changed a lot of the rules since I did wrestling, where, back when I did it, we're talking about in the 80s, it was, I mean, I've been 5'9", I've been 5'9" since I was in, 8th grade, and I'm a skinny guy and I weigh 155 pounds, but I was literally in high school, going down to 112 and 118 pounds. And it was just this, it was the routine. You would wrestle on Friday, and you'd eat, you'd stuff yourself for 2 days, and then you'd go 5 days. You're dehydrating. I'd weigh in on Monday, and I'd be 20 pounds overweight, so I'd have to get put the sweats on, and it was one of those things. And I always, when I was young, I'd say to my dad, why can't everybody just wrestle what they weigh? But it's such a competitive sport that everybody, if I'm wrestling 150, I'm really wrestling a guy who's won it 170, so it's just, I know boxers go through the same thing, but it was, I just thought I really wanted to show the struggle going through it. And it was interesting because when we were the film was in some limited theaters, and we tried as much as we could show up, and as the people would walk out of the theater and they'd meet us, it was kind of nice because you don't get that in a real movie, and I had a lot of what was interesting is I had a lot of females during the time that the film ran that they came up to me and were like, had went through the same bulimic sort of stuff, just maybe models or just trying the insecurity, but they never saw a boy go through it. So it was kind of, it was kind of an interesting angle there, but I just wanted to tell the truth as much as I could about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the sort of the movie making process, I just wanted to sort of ask what some of the biggest challenges you faced when it comes to the actual production of the movie.
Absolutely. In fact, believe it or not, I just literally finished another movie. I haven't done a movie in years, and we literally just mixed the film, and we're going to be releasing it literally in another month or two. And it's, you write your script, and unfortunately, it was, you go on set and you're limited with the budget. This is, this, when I did Reversal, it was, believe it or not, I spent $400,000. It was a 4-week shoot. That sounds like a lot of money, but it's not to make a movie. And
I mean, when you consider, like you say, when you hear box office budgets, it's like you say, it's really not a lot of money to work with, to be fair.
Exactly. And probably the biggest challenge is, and even for me, you have your script, and then you're on set, and what ended up happening was, one of the biggest challenges, believe it or not, that we had was the actress who played the wife. She was an experienced actor, but for some reason, when she was on set, she was nervous. And I had to, we had several scenes that I just couldn't use, because we were all, not that we're all great actors, but we were all at least telling the truth. And she would come in and sort of act. And I didn't realize it till we were in the editing room. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have a movie here. And then you have to we had to basically sit in the editing room. And that's when we go, okay, look, that's why you don't see the mom so much in the movie. But it was, Alan's like, look, let's just make it about the father and son. So then we ended up, like, when I was watching when we were in the editing room, I was like, oh man, we don't have a movie here. And he goes, no, hold on, let's see. So then you start to edit it, and really in the editing is where you have to kind of forget what you wrote, and you have to go, look, this is what we shot, this is what we have, let's try to edit a movie out of it. So that was the biggest challenge, but with the editing, and I never loved the movie, but I was smart enough to go, look, let's see what people think, because you get too close to it where you just don't, it'll drive you crazy. But what was nice with it was we saw what real people thought of the movie, and we got a good response with that. So that made it nice.
Yeah.
So obviously you starred in the movie, you wrote the movie, and you produced the movie, but obviously you decided to have Alan direct the movie. Was it something you considered yourself, and to kind of direct the film? And if not, how did you make the decision to go with Alan?
Well, I just number one, I didn't have the experience, and to try to tackle that, I really wanted to go with somebody who had the experience of directing, because you got to just know so much about where to, the directors also, what's big with them is they're always thinking story as much, and working with the DP on the camera angles and things like this. So there was no way I was going to try to do that part of it, because then it would have been just, but I had my faith in Alan. What I knew about Alan was he would basically at least make sure, and I told him when we were shooting, unfortunately, when you do a movie like this, you only get a couple takes on a scene. So, you show up at a location, and, you might have to go to 2 or 3 locations in a day, where, Hollywood will stay at a location, they'll shoot, 3 pages, 2 pages in a day, and we're shooting, 12 pages in a day. So you just have to move, so it was, that's the pretty challenging part,
Yeah. So obviously, in line with this, we've seen sort of various quotes and reviews saying about like their sort of favorite parts of the film. I even mentioned earlier myself talking about the scene where you're talking to Leo at the end. So I just wondered, from your standpoint, do you have any particular favorite scenes from the movie?
I got to tell you, the gem that I have is, if you remember the guy, his name is Jerry Seaman, and he's at the barn. And believe it or not, that wasn't in the script. What happened was, we go there to Pennsylvania, and I of course, think about it, I have to get the house the family lives in, the high schools, and I had to really get all this for free, because we can't afford you know, it's like Hollywood can go, oh, we want your high school. They can cut a check, and you know they're in the high school. And so we went to the wrestling coach at Washington High, and he said, I said, look, you know, read the script if you like it. You know, and of course, the good news was all wrestlers loved it. So they were like, hey, we got the high school. No problem. We locked that down. And then he said, you got to meet Jerry at the barn, you know, because and I said, what are you talking about? So he drives me to this place that's in the film. And this guy, Jerry, God bless him. What he does is he takes kids that he thinks have talent for wrestling, and he gets them into wrestling, tries to get them to become state qualifiers or state champions to get a college degree. It's just a beautiful thing. So when we went there, me and Alan are looking at each other, and we see this barn and the way he's training these kids. And so Alan and I went back to the hotel and that night, and I said, we got to put him in the movie. So we actually sat up all night and just rewrote the script and said, let's and you know, he'd never acted. We just said, look, take Leo and his dad. That's when we had the scene where he was going to cut weight, and I said, I'm taking you to the barn, and we cut to Jerry. And I just think that was just a gift that we got. You know, one of those things as a filmmaker, you're like, oh, thank you. You know,
that first scene with him, to be honest, is so much fun as well. Like I was shocked when it cuts to him and he's just almost with like no effort at all. Just you first meet him and he's on his hands.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
and that's how the guy was.
At him like it was nothing. Yeah.
This guy's like almost 70 in a handstand when we walk in. You know, because I mean we you know, we blocked. I mean, we went there because we shot all his scenes in a day, you know, in the movie. And so we're like, well, where do we start? He goes, well, what's your normal routine? And he's doing this. And I go, genius, let's get that, you know? So it was, he just is, it's just a guy who loves, and you guys know wrestling, amateur wrestling is a fraternity, you know, it's a family. People get in. That was, you know, that was the best thing for me, because I really didn't get a chance when I was in wrestling to enjoy it, because my dad, the real story, the biggest everything in the movie is pretty much true except for the very end of the film. In real life, what I wrote, and this is another thing Alan helped me with, in real life, I basically ran away from home. My girlfriend got killed in a car crash. I was supposed to go to this party with her. Instead, I had to train. My dad didn't even know I had a girlfriend, because his whole thing was wrestling, you know. And so the real story was I walked away from the sport. And Alan, again, another great thing, having a creative person to bounce off of, he said, Jimmy, you know, this is your life story, but we're also making a movie, so we get to make things up if you want. And I was like, I was kind of too attached to my own story. And I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know, what do you want on your epitaph here? Do you want it, you know, to your, and I never thought of, you know, my dad watching the movie. For some reason, the whole time I was going through this, I never once thought, well, what are my parents going to think? I was just making the movie. And I said, wait a minute, you're right. And that was when I actually came up with the idea, said, well, my dad's never flown on an airplane, which was true. And in Pennsylvania, you know, you get on those little hoppers and you go to Pittsburgh, and then you take the real flight. And I said, what if we did a thing where the dad in the end, you know, comes through and says, basically, you know, it's time for you to follow your dreams, not mine. And I think it really resonated. So that was such a win. And I got to tell you, the biggest win for me with the film, and keep in mind, we won a prize at the first Tribeca Film Festival. I mean, we sold some like 80,000 DVDs to the wrestling community. I mean, this was a little film that took off. But I got to tell you, the best thing for me is me and my dad we didn't really talk for almost, you know, I moved from Pennsylvania to California, got into radio through my uncle, was working. I had a radio career, and we rarely talked for probably 10 years. And then when I made the film, I called my uncle and I said, I'd like to get you guys to come out and see it in a theater. And we screened it at Paramount Pictures in their theater. I fly my dad out. He watches the film. After the film, I get chills even now. he's literally crying. And this is a tough, wrestling coach father. And he says, for 20 years, I wanted to tell you what I just saw up there. So it was like that was the big, and ever since then we talk every week, and it really bonded us. So that was the biggest win for me, to be honest, guys, with the film.
That's amazing to know, to be fair. Yeah.
was that
And
the
you
first
guys
time
know,
you went on a plane as
being
well?
fathers, the other thing is, and if you guys are dads, remember,
Yeah.
I did this when I did the script. I was, 41 years old, and I was like, you don't realize, but I got so much from wrestling. I mean, that just that willpower of. I mean, look, I became self-made. I'm able to spend my own money to make a film. I became successful, and I came from nothing. I didn't go to college, and I think it was when you look back as you're older, you're going, how did this? But I think that willpower of him instilling in me, young, the willpower of losing the weight, of training and doing all this, gave me that. I just sort of, I didn't, even making the film, I didn't know I didn't understand the word no. It was like, let's go. So you don't realize that when you're a kid. When you're 20, you're like, oh man, this was a pain in the butt. But then you realize later in life, and I really appreciate. It was funny because I live in Malibu, California, and I got super lucky. I've got the ocean view house, looking out at the beach. And my dad, this was after the film. This was a few years later, and he's in Florida. He's in a retirement area, and I fly him out, and we're sitting on the patio, and he says to me, I guess I didn't fuck up that bad to me, like in raising you. And I looked at him and I said, Dad, are you kidding? If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't, you know what I mean? So it's just, that's the like you guys know, having kids, there's no playbook,
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, I think it's like that statement there, like, oh, I guess I didn't fuck up so bad. It just shows that even to that point, it's still a question of like, am I doing the right thing? Have I done the right thing? And that's something I think, I think all fathers go through, and it's something that's been captured so well in this film, to be fair.
It's a tough one because for example, I've got two older kids. They're now 28 and 30, but when they were younger, and they're soft. I mean, I tried to get them to there's wrestling in California. It's a joke, But I mean, I exposed them to sports, but I gave them love, a lot of love. And it's just, I was 20, because even when they were in high school, I was like, they're really soft. I'm not going to be the great Santini dad on my kids, to get them to be better. But I went through that. I was like, God, I got brought up so hard. Are they ever going to be, successful? But it was like, I mean, they'll do good in whatever they do. They're great kids, and I love them. But it was just old school with us. I mean, my dad never told me he loved me till I was 40. You know what I'm saying? It's just how it was in those days.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So obviously you mentioned a little bit earlier that you obviously just kind of did like a, let's wait and see and see how the movie does. And obviously it went on to get critical acclaim. Obviously you mentioned it won, awards like Tribeca, and even like Rotten Tomatoes, it's got like a 84% user score on there. Did you expect it to be received so favorably?
I really didn't, because like I said, I really didn't like the film in a way, because I was holding on to, I had a lot of scenes that ended up, unfortunately, when I had the meetings here in Hollywood, and you're hiring, your keys, they're like, I was like, look, can I do this, guys, for this amount of money? Because I didn't know. I mean, I literally was going into this seam of my pants. I had no background, never went to school for film. And of course, they all say yes, you realize later, to get the job. And then we're on set and they're like, you can't do that. I go, wait, we don't have enough money. I go, whoa. Like, for example, I had a couple of scenes where they're on a school bus and they're traveling, through the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, going to the next meet. And they're going, wow, we got to get rid of the school bus. And I'm like, no, there's, there's so much camaraderie of the guy, sitting in there. Because I would sit on the school bus, and my best friend Roger literally was the heavyweight. So he'd be eating a banana and I'd be spitting in a cup, because he needed to weigh so much to wrestle heavyweight, and I was still a half a pound over going to the meet. And I've got a line producer going, that's not important, Jimmy. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. It is, you know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
obviously when you're not, when you're not Spielberg or Michael Mann, it's like, sorry, you're not going to get it, So, but it is nice how it was received, and and I think it's a good. In fact, that's really kind of what happened. How you guys saw it was because when I did the film, it was really the DVD days and all that, and then about 6 months ago, I got approached by a distributor that somehow saw the movie, and they're like, "Hey, do you have a home for it?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not on any of it. I did do a deal back in the day with Netflix, but that was when they had the DVDs, that they would mail to your house. So they weren't even a stream. In fact, I believe it or not, Ted Sarandos, I still have the email, was like the CEO of Netflix actually saw my movie because at the time they were needing content, and he called me personally and sent me an email. And in those days, I gave him, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 just of the disc, and he gave, and I don't know, I got a check for 40 grand or whatever from him, but I still have the email. And I thought, the guy saw the movie, but I thought now with the streaming and everything. So that was what, this distributor, he said, he got it on Apple and Amazon. I guess it's going to be on Tubi now in another month. So it's kind of what I'm excited about is it's, there's a whole new generation. It's that kind of a film. It's kind of a timeless film because it wasn't set in nowadays. And it's that's really what's been interesting is to have a distributor take a movie. They don't take a movie with unknowns, even if it did break out a little bit from that long ago, and re-release it to a whole new generation. So that's exciting, for me. I'm just looking for a home for it,
Yeah. So while you mentioned the difference in DVDs and moving over to the streaming side, can I ask how you found the sort of moving into the streaming area? How you found the response so far?
What's that?
In terms of moving on to streaming platforms, can I ask how you sort of found that reception?
Yeah, that's where the business is now. Yeah, I mean, it's all about, unfortunately, independent films. You even see major movies are being released directly through Apple and Netflix. So it's definitely. I mean, they're the new studios, and I think it's great. We just finished this film that we're hoping to sell it to either an Apple, Amazon, or Netflix right up front, hopefully as an original, that where they end up, it's like their movie. I'm hoping that we can pull that off.
That's awesome.
So obviously, as noted, kind of at the end of the movie, we kind of touched on it a little bit before. So the NCAA changed obviously the weight rules and requiring wrestlers to kind of compete at their natural weights. But obviously, we do still see cases today, like in the likes of mixed martial arts and stuff, where people are in the sauna last minute before they're due for weigh-ins and things like that. Do you still think it is an issue in other areas of the sport today? And has it?
I mean, Right. I think there's always going to, what ended up happening was, funny enough, when I made the film, I wasn't thinking, if you really look at it in a way, it kind of shows wrestling in a bad light, and so what happened was I didn't make it for the wrestling community, but what happened was, like Jack, he got a room full of Olympic gold medalists. We did a screening, and Kendall Cross came, Kenny Monday, Kevin Jackson, our Olympic coach, Kurt Angle. And they were it was funny because they met me and they're like, okay, I guess they've seen movies. And then they were like, Kurt Angle came up to me in tears going, I just saw my life story, so it was, but what happened was and then USA Wrestling was behind it. And that was when they said, well, look, they were the ones who had the idea for me to put that thing at the end of the film, because it was, I mean, there's never been a movie that shows. In fact, I had an interesting thing happen. The guy who wrote, you remember the movie Vision Quest? I don't know, you guys may have never seen this, but there was a wrestling movie, you guys are young, it's called Vision Quest with Matthew Modine, and it broke out Madonna, one of her songs. Right. But it's a wrestling movie that was written, and John Irving wrote to me. John Irving, believe it or not, was a wrestler. He won the Oscar for Cider House Rules. He did the World According to Garp, if you remember, with Robin Williams, where Robin Williams is a wrestler in that movie. But John wrote to me and he said, this is what Vision Quest wanted to do, but Hollywood, they made it, any wrestler watch it. Vision Quest Center, I mean, it was a blockbuster movie, but it showed wrestling in a Hollywood light. And what they liked about us was we showed it on the hardcore, what really a wrestler goes through. And they wrote to me, and he wrote to me and said, you know, I appreciate you being honest. And then when I met with USA Wrestling, they were like, they were like, look, why don't we do this sort of disclaimer? And I said, absolutely. So that was why, you know, we did that. But I don't think it's certainly as bad as it was, to answer your question, back in those days. Because back in those days, we didn't weigh in at the beginning of the year, and so there was no rules or regulations. So I think now, you know, especially on the collegiate end, I don't know so much about the UFC as far as that goes, but in the college realm, I think they have to be. I think they have to, you know, they have to do spot checks, and during the beginning of the season, let's see, they're supposed to, okay, here's what you weigh. You're allowed to lose maybe 7 or 8, 6 or 7 pounds. That's it. So I think they're trying to get a handle on it. Yeah.
So obviously, you mentioned the likes of Kurt Angle there, like, and sort of how he sort of saw it, and like you say, essentially told his life story, and seeing how it resonated with people such as Kurt Angle, and obviously notably Sting for us in the world of professional wrestling. So how does it feel knowing that it sort of resonated with like Olympians and people at that level?
Oh, it was great. It was a really good feeling. In fact, Kurt had he had the Kurt Angle Classic at the time, like 6 months later, and you got to come to the Kurt Angle Classic, and we had a booth there and DVDs, and he was signing the DVD.
That's awesome, man.
I was like, this guy isn't even in our movie, but he's like, was just really supportive. You know, that was the biggest thing about it, is the love that the wrestling community, you know, gave to it, and it made me feel proud that they. You know, I think again, what they appreciated is, look, and even if you see the scenes where the kids are wrestling, even though again we're on a shoestring budget, we only, you know, we have to shoot all this stuff in a few hours, but you at least, I'd rather teach a wrestler how to go ask a girl out than teach an actor how to wrestle. That was really the risk, you know, because if we go with the quote actors, are the wrestling scenes going to suffer, you know?
Yeah.
Luckily, we got lucky. I mean, it was a huge risk.
No, definitely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to mention the actual wrestling scenes. I think they were sharp beautifully, especially the sort of the end scene. I think it's something that, again, when Kurt's mentioned in his review, which I believe is on your website, he's mentioned that's at the end match, and sort of how well it was shot. I mean, can I ask, in terms of the actual shooting, is it quite difficult, because obviously there's a lot of movements involved there? Is it quite difficult to sort of get that looking right?
Yeah, if we were doing that now, we would try to have like 2 cameras. You know, there we had 1 camera, so it was really setting up the camera and just moving it into a few different positions and letting them go. And thank God they were real wrestlers, because they were getting, you know, we got to do another take, guys. You know. So they were wrestling for, you know, probably, you know, 3 hours, you know, in that, you know,
I've not considered that. Yeah, so we get that one scene, but obviously there's a lot more that goes into it. Yeah,
exactly. And even the little kid, you know, the kid Derek Nelson, of course, he's grown now, but the kid who played, I mean, he couldn't even read at the time, and he was a real wrestler as well. And I just would go, you know, he was rehearsing his lines with me in between takes, and I mean, the kid just does a phenomenal job. And what was funny was he was kind of a weakling wrestler, and when we were filming, the kids kept beating him up, so we had to stop it and go, no, we need you to be the kid who gets him in the arm bar. You know, so we had to do some creative, you know, retakes and stuff like that to get the kid to look like he was, you know, a good wrestler at that age. It was quite challenging.
So obviously you mentioned before that you've since been obviously working, kind of come back to film. You've been working on another movie recently and kind of mixing the audio and everything like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and what else you've got in the pipeline at the minute?
Sure. I mean, basically, I wrote a screenplay. I sadly years ago went through a divorce and ended up raising 2 sons on my own since they were 6 and 8. Even though technically we had it was 50-50, but she chose to be a no-show mom, unfortunately. And believe it or not, she got a ton of money, and I had to pay child. I couldn't believe when I went through the divorce how insane it is, where virtually you can come home and your partner is having an affair, and you can lose everything. You know, being the guy who did nothing wrong, you know, building your empire for your family. So I always had in the back of my mind of doing a divorce film. There was one done years ago. You guys may have never seen it, with Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep, called Kramer versus Kramer. And it's a heartbreaking film about divorce. So I had that in my mind. And so I wrote a screenplay about divorce, and then I put it down. And basically, I finally last year had a chance to rewrite it. And I met a director by the name of Mick Davis, who's a really credible director. He's done a lot of films. One of his most notably is Modigliani, the artist. Andy Garcia plays Modigliani. If you've never seen it, you should check it out. And he's done a lot of films, and he read my script and he said, Jimmy, why don't we do this? It's kind of the same thing as Alan. And I said, I don't know, so yeah. And this one I've spent about $800,000 on, so it's a bit riskier. But basically, it's again about my life and not. But basically, it's about a music producer who lives in Malibu. He's successful, but he hasn't had a hit record in some time. So he's trying to revive this rock band. We have a real rock band that's in the movie, and like I said, it hasn't been released or anything yet. But we literally just, well, let me finish telling you what it's about. But basically, he's trying to finish this record, which his whole career is hanging on. And we got a chance to use Robbie Krieger's recording studio from The Doors, and he actually does a cameo in the movie. And we have all these funny scenes. It's funny in the studio, but what ends up happening is he's got two kids, and they happen to be a boy and a girl in the movie, even though I have two sons. And he's trying to make this record, and out of the blue, his wife now he finds out is having an affair. So now he's got to go through a divorce, and his son is coming out as gay, and it's a comedy, believe it or not. But it's heartfelt. Funny enough, we just finished mixing last week. The movie's done. They're doing some tweaks in the mix. And I got to tell you, the handful of people who saw it were laughing out loud and crying. So it was it ultimately is a feel-good film. It's called Trust in Love, because what happens is the kid in the movie, he's into electronic beats, and the dad is an 80s rocker, and the son is like, and the dad's like, the dad's like, look, that's not music, that's beats. But what happens is he turns the band on to this beat that ends up being a song called Trust in Love. And the last scene of the movie, we literally have a rock concert, and the kids on stage, and they play the song, and the family alludes to being able to get back together again. So it's again, they say write what you know. So it's like a slice of my life, but I'll keep you updated on it and stuff on what we're doing. But yeah, we literally will have it. It's done, and we'll do a screening for distributors probably in like a month or so, and it's sort of like reversal. I don't know what's going to happen.
That's
hopefully I can get my money back.
That's it. So obviously, you've gone there. You've gone. I want to make the film. You've done it. Is there any advice that you'd give for any aspiring filmmakers or anyone who wants to sort of take that similar risk and tell their story?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, nowadays, guys, you can make a film. And I mean, look, I did a bigger budgeted thing, but what's great about the industry now is because of digital technology. I mean, I always, I've had so many friends that have tried to shop their scripts and get their film quote made. Like nobody would have made Reversal. Nobody would have made this new film that I did. And that's why I always encourage people, you can pretty much make a movie for any budget. I mean, I've seen people make a film for $5,000, because on their iPhone. I mean, it's all, so there's I always tell people, just go out and do something. And even if you just shoot it and it's super rough, I think you have better odds if you want to kick it up to be a bigger production. At least somebody can go, well, let me watch what you did, as opposed to, it's so hard to get somebody, number one, to even read a script. you know, it'd be like if I would have sent you guys Reversal and said, hey, read this script, you'd be like, right. But if I say, hey, watch this movie, the odds are you'll go, oh, I'll watch a film, because that's, you know what I'm saying? All you got to do is hit play. Yeah. You know? And if it sucks, you turn it off after 10 minutes, you know. But I just encourage you to just, you know, go for it. Get a camera, get your friends, and do it at any budget.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing advice. Jimmy, you know, just can't thank you enough for taking the time to come and talk to us today, and you know, tell us all about Reversal, and obviously, yeah, your new film as well. So, just yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate this. I'll stay in touch with you, and thank you so much for having me on, guys. I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you.